Hey guys, it's Mr. Torres here. What we're going to do today is we're going to take some notes, and I'm going to be using my iPad to take these notes using this app called Freeform. You're welcome to take notes on a sheet of paper. You're welcome to take notes in your own way. The type of notes that we're going to take today, or that I'm going to take, are called concept mapping notes. This is a method of taking notes that is a little bit different than probably what you're used to. Usually, when you take notes, you probably write your notes out like this, like you have a word. You probably, you're on lined paper, you have a word, you write down the definition, you write down the examples, and before you know it, you have a page. This is your page. And your page looks like this. It's full of words and everything. And maybe you've used your, highlighter to highlight important things and everything like that. And that's great. If you like taking notes like that, you're more than welcome to take notes like that. However, I like taking notes in a concept map form because it allows me to see the relationships between concepts for whatever we are studying. And so I'm going to show you that today. These can be easily converted into linear notes if that works better for you. If not, again, you can take these on your iPad. If you have an iPad, you can take these on a sheet of paper. You can use as many colors as you want. It's perfectly fine. These are your notes, okay? So what we are taking notes on today is we're taking notes on sonnets. And sonnets are a type of poem, okay? So we are looking at poetry, and specifically, we're looking at a type of poem called a sonnet, okay? So what is a sonnet? Well, this is going to be like kind of our middle of our concept map, okay? So we're going to look at three different aspects of sonnets. Okay, so first of all, sonnet is a type of poem, and it contains 14 lines of what is known as iambic pentameter. And we will talk about iambic pentameter here in a bit, but just know that a sonnet is a 14-lined poem, and those 14 lines are organized in iambic pentameter. A sonnet also contains a volta, also known as a turn. And we'll talk about what a volta or a turn is a little bit later. All right. And then the last kind of aspect of sonnets that we're going to look at is sonnets have a set rhyme scheme. Okay. So again, three major aspects of sonnets. We have a set rhyme scheme. We have 14 lines of iambic pentameter, and we have a volta or a turn, okay? So we're going to look at and expand on the kind of relationship between these things as they relate to sonnets, okay? So first things first, I'm going to start with rhyme scheme, okay? So rhyme scheme, I'm just going to write a quick definition of rhyme scheme. Okay, and rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymed words at the end of the lines of poetry or verse. We often call poetry verse, but rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymed words at the end of the lines of poetry or verse. And we represent rhyme scheme by placing letters of the alphabet at the end of lines to identify the rhyme scheme, the pattern. For example, we may have a rhyme scheme that is A, B, C, D, C, D. All right, so we have rhyme scheme here. All right, so sonnet is a type of poem. It contains a set rhyme scheme. Rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymed words at the end of the lines of poetry or verse. It is represented by placing letters of the alphabet at the end of lines. For example, A, B, C, D, C, D. Okay? Now, when we talk about rhyme scheme and the different, rhyme schemes that can be in sonnets, sonnets are actually classified by rhyme scheme. So there are three major types of sonnets, and we classify them using their rhyme scheme. Okay, so the first type of sonnet that we're going to look at is the Italian sonnet. All right, so the Italian sonnet consists of an octave. An octave is a series of 8 lines, followed by a sestet. Okay, so here we have 8 lines. Our sestet has 6 lines. Okay. And so the 8 plus 6 gives us our 14. Our 14 lines right there. 14 lines of iambic pentameter, okay? So we have an octave, we have a sestet, and then we have a volta, of course, okay? And so for the octave, the rhyme scheme for the octave goes like this. It goes A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A. So that's the rhyme scheme for the first 8 lines. The following 6 lines then go like this, okay? So the 6 lines that follow the octave go C, D, E, C, D, E, or C, D, C, D, C, D, or C, D, C, D, E, E. Okay, and so these are the different types of rhyme schemes that we could have for the Italian sonnet. All right, so that's just one type of our sonnet. So if I kind of zoom out here, I can look at my concept map and I can see I'm building on rhyme scheme here. Let me get my laser pointer. I know I have one somewhere around here. Probably not. It's probably a different resource. But anyway, so as you can see, we're going up rhyme scheme, right? Then we are kind of connecting the idea of rhyme scheme back to what iambic pentameter is. Okay. So the next type of sonnet that we have, I'm going to kind of come up here a little bit. Zoom in. Is the Shakespearean sonnet, also known as the English sonnet. So our Shakespearean sonnet is, of course, named after the bard, the greatest of all time, William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare is really the person who made sonnets famous. And to get kind of a good idea of what a sonnet is, or maybe like an analogy, so we know that sonnets are a type of poetry, right? So I want you to think of sonnets much like you would a subgenre of music. So in literature, we have genres, and one of the genres is poetry, right? Well, the subgenre would be a sonnet. So it's just like in music. Music, one of the genres that you have is hip hop. And then a subgenre of hip hop would be like something like trap music or something like that. And if you're not familiar with what trap music is, I guarantee you hear it all the time, especially if you're in a quiet class where a student has their headphones in and they have them blaring to like 100. And then all you can hear is like like the drums. Those are trap drums. So you know what trap music is. And just like trap music became very, very popular, sonnets became extremely, extremely popular. And so Shakespeare was really the person who popularized sonnets. And after they saw what Shakespeare was doing, everybody kind of wanted to do what Shakespeare was doing. All right. So the Shakespearean sonnet contains, as far as rhyme scheme goes, it contains 3 quatrains. All right. 3 quatrains are 3 groups of 4 lines, 3 quatrains with a concluding couplet, and it has a volta or a turn. And actually, I failed to talk about the volta in the Italian sonnet. So let's go back to the Italian sonnet really quickly. So the volta in the Italian sonnet usually happens at the sestet. So after the octave, we then have the volta here. All right. So let's go back to Shakespearean sonnets. That was Italian sonnets. So 3 quatrains. And for the Shakespearean sonnets, our rhyme scheme for the 3 quatrains is A, B, A, B. C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F. And then our concluding couplet, also called the heroic couplet, is G, G. Okay? And the volta usually being the operative word, occurs at the couplet. All right? So our volta usually happens when we get to the final 2 lines of the Shakespearean sonnet. All right, now let's go to our 3rd type of sonnet. 3rd type of sonnet is going to be our Spenserian sonnet. All right. And this is just a really fancy Shakespearean sonnet. Misspelled Shakespearean. All right, a really fancy Shakespearean sonnet. All right, and so it consists also of 3 quatrains. A concluding couplet. And a volta, aka our turn. So our Spenserian sonnet, again, we mentioned that this is like a fancy Shakespearean sonnet. So if you look at the rhyme scheme for the Shakespearean sonnet, we see that we have A, B, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, right? We see that we have that type of rhyme scheme. Well, for the Spenserian sonnet, whoever created this sonnet just thought that wasn't good enough, and I have to be fancier than the GOAT, William Shakespeare, so I'm just going to do a little bit more razzle dazzle, all right? And so we have 3 quatrains, but the rhyme scheme is A, B, B, C, C, D, D. Okay, so as you can see, the final letter of the previous line kind of moves into that next rhyme scheme. Okay, and then our couplet is going to be E, E. Our volta and turn, same thing. It's at the couplet, like the Shakespearean sonnet. right? So we have 3 quatrains. Our volta or turn occurs at the concluding couplet. And what the volta or turn is, we didn't really define that yet, but we can go ahead and we can talk about that after we get to the 14 lines of iambic pentameter. Okay, getting a little bit ahead of myself. All right, so let's talk about iambic pentameter really quickly. Okay, so we know that we have a 14-line poem. Okay, iambic pentameter. Let's kind of define some keywords. Okay, so first we're going to define an iamb. Okay, an iamb is a type of metric foot. Okay, it's a measuring tool for poetry. An iamb consists of one unstressed syllable followed by one stressed syllable. And we have little symbols for stressed and unstressed. And so an unstressed symbol is this little U, and we would put it above the unstressed part of the word. And the stressed symbol is this little kind of slanted line. Okay, so this is what an iamb is. Now, it's important to understand that there are different kinds of meter, and different types of poems have different kinds of meter, but sonnets really focus on iambic pentameter. Okay, now let's talk about pentameter really quickly. Now, if you are a wordsmith or anybody who is interested in words, you might understand that pentameter, we have the word meter, right? A measure, and then we have penta here. This indicates 5, okay? So here, we're going to write pentameter describes the number of feet in each line. Now let's look at meter a little bit more closely. All right, so meter. Meter is the organized rhythm of a poem. It comes from the Greek to measure. It is the drumbeat of poetry. And it manifests in the language. It manifests the language in the body of the poem. And so later on, when we start looking at a sonnet and really studying it, we will see that the meaning is really, really reflected in the form. Like how it's put together in iambic pentameter really helps contribute to the meaning. And this is based on syllable count. So iambic pentameter based on syllable count. So let me just circle this, get my concept map going. If I zoom out a little bit, I can see that producing a pretty interesting concept map. Okay, and again, if this is not your style of taking notes, you're welcome to take linear notes again. But I really, really like this because it really helps me see how different things are connected to one another. For instance, how we have the 14 lines of iambic pentameter. So let me just give you a quick little introduction, or maybe introduction is the wrong word, a quick little example of iambic pentameter from one of William Shakespeare's most famous sonnets, Sonnet 118. So he starts the sonnet with this phrase: shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Not a phrase, it's a question. All right. And so what we do when we determine the meter of a poem is we look first. I like to look first at syllable count. Okay. And so syllable count, just like whenever you were in grade school, or we're still in grade school, like you were in, elementary school, when you would maybe clap your hands together for the syllable count, syllable, right? That's kind of how we identify. Now, we might not be clapping our hands together, but let me tell you, as a 33-year-old person, I am still counting on my fingers to help me with syllable count. So there's no shame in my game. You just got to figure it out, right? And so if you count the syllables, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? You will see that there are 10 syllables in this line, okay? And what we would do to identify the meter is we would separate the syllables. So shall I, that's 2 syllables. Compare, that's 2 more. Thee to a summer's day. And you will see that I have 5 groups here, and that's where my pentameter comes from. 5 groups. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of syllables that are in pairs. Okay. All right. And so what we do here is we mark, to find the meter, we mark the stressed and unstressed syllables. Okay. Now, a stressed syllable, let's talk about let's talk about first an unstressed syllable. So an unstressed syllable is something that you say said with less emphasis. Okay? So an unstressed syllable is said with less emphasis. A stressed syllable is said with more emphasis. And you'll notice, or you might notice eventually, that this is just how humans naturally talk, how we naturally talk in English. There are some syllables that are more stressed than others, okay? And so when we talk about stress, we want to talk about maybe the volume at which a syllable is said or a word is said. Some syllables may be said with a higher volume or a higher pitch, okay? And so if we look at this line, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And if we really slow it down and stress it, we'll notice that we say certain syllables with more emphasis. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, right? Okay, so shall I? So when I say shall I, you'll notice that the I is a little bit more drawn out. So that is the stressed syllable. So the unstressed syllable is shall. Let me put that in a different color. Shall I compare? So come is not said as emphatically as pair. The to a day, right? And so this is what it looks like when we identify the meter of a sonnet. We should have one unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And it really is odd to think about measuring lines on a page in this way, but it is really the way that humans talk. And the interesting thing about this is that it helps to create kind of like a sing-song quality. And you have to understand that way back in the day, before writing was even a thing, before people were putting pen to paper or chisel to stone to write things down, a lot of things were written in poetry form. So if you look at Homer's The Odyssey or Beowulf, that is written in a song. And the reasons that those things were written in song is because they had to be memorable. And so these tales, these stories were sung to one another in order to pass them down. And it's the sing-song equality that would help them be memorable. And that found its way once we started writing. That stuff didn't just disappear. The sing-song equality found its way into our writing. All right. And so that's why we have this type of structure here. This iambic pentameter in sonnets. Okay, now let's talk about our volta or our turn. Okay, so let me just, get my other notes out. Let's look at the volta. So the volta, is a rhetorical shift or dramatic change in thought or emotion. And think of the volta, not entirely, but think of the volta as somewhat of a shift, similar to what we see in other types of poetry, where in other types of poetry, you may see a shift in tone, a shift in style, a shift in rhyme. Volta, we have a rhetorical shift or dramatic change. And so what happens here, we talk about the types of sonnets that we have, the Shakespearean, right? The Spenserian, right? The Italian, right? They all have a volta and a turn at a certain place within the poem. And what happens is many, many times before the volta, for instance, in the quatrains here in a Shakespearean sonnet, before the volta, we may be asking questions. We may be exploring concepts such as love. Sonnets are all about love and lust and desire and things like that. We may be asking questions, exploring concepts, but then when we get to the volta with the concluding couplet, we may be answering questions. We may be making conclusions. So that is really the function of a volta. It is to shift from asking a question to answering a question, to exploring concepts, to making conclusions about those concepts. Okay. So as you can see, as we zoom out, all of these things are interconnected. And if this was a good way of taking notes for you, then, I'm happy that I was able to help you find a cool way of taking notes. To me, this is much more helpful because, again, when I look at a piece of paper, I used to take notes in college and I'd have my paper here, right? And let's just say I'm in my history class and I'm taking notes on World War II, and I've got all these notes and definitions and everything, and certain things are highlighted. And before I even really knew what to highlight or how to highlight, I was highlighting everything. And my idea now as a teacher is, if I'm going to highlight everything, why the heck am I highlighting anything, right? But in college, I would take notes like this, and really I would study or cram for an exam the night before, and I would look at this paper or multiple pieces. I'd have 3 or 4 different pieces of paper for one concept, and I would just feel so defeated because I had done all the reading before, and now I have to do even more reading, right? Just to study. Whereas if I have this concept map, like, yes, I do have to read, but I'm able to see the relationships between ideas. I'm able to see how different ideas influence one another, right? How the rhyme scheme comes up in the 14 lines of iambic pentameter, how the volta is in a certain portion of the sonnet, right? So this is why I like taking these nonlinear kind of concept map notes. If it was helpful, great. If it wasn't helpful, and you like taking notes this way, that's perfectly fine as well. Just understand that you do need to know this information, okay? Again, we will see you in class. We will be looking at sonnets and breaking them down piece by piece. I hope this was helpful for you all.